One of the things that many professors never learn anything about is public speaking for the college classroom. You would think they would. Most professors, if they have a PhD, it's just assumed they can teach. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but most universities, that's the assumption. The same is true about public speaking. Well, if you got a PhD or whatever the terminal degree is in your field, then you got to be a good public speaker. Well, that doesn't necessarily come easily, and so we have an expert, the lady who is in charge of all of those intro to communication classes in the College of Communication and Information Sciences. Dr. Alexa Chilcutt is going to talk to us about public speaking in the college classroom. Alexa?
So, how many of you are just a little bit anxious about the first day of lab or class? Raise your hand. A little bit. If you're not, something's probably wrong. You should be. You should be anxious, just a little bit. The reality of public speaking is not, the goal is not to be so good at the art of public speaking that you never get nervous or anxious about it. The reality is you want those butterflies, because if you don't have them, then you're not going to have the energy that the lab or the classroom needs. What you want to do is learn how to make those butterflies fly in formation. That's the art. That's the art of public speaking. So what we're going to talk about today is 3 things about the art of public speaking. Now, I am the director of the public speaking program here at the university, and yes, I do teach and manage public speaking labs for undergraduates, but I'm also a professional public speaker. I do continuing education courses for professional groups, for dentists and accountants and community college leaders. It doesn't matter who you're speaking to. All of those things that make you a good public speaker are the same no matter who your audience is. And the people, the undergraduates that take public speaking, are typically, the majority of them are outside of the College of Communication and Information Sciences. They're engineering students and business students and education students. And I get called across campus to help the faculty in a lot of these areas improve their skills. So what I want to do is give you some tools today that you can think about and become a more proficient public speaker. So if you will look at your handout that you have on page, let's look, I'm pretty loud, sorry, 104, then you'll see that I have 3 main things laid out. And in the art of rhetoric, which we don't need to necessarily know at this point, but you have 3 things about public speaking. The first is logos, then ethos, then pathos. So what is logos? Well, I'm going to give you tools in these 3 areas. All right, the first thing is, we talked about, how many of you came to one of the leading lab class panels that I was in with Lisa and Murray? Okay, fantastic. We talked about this time and time again in there. Professionalism, being prepared. Logos is the logic, the message itself. And the reality is that you need to prepare that message for your students. You need to be familiarized enough with the material that you can logically convey it to them. Now, here is the sticky part. You already have an undergraduate degree. Many of you already have a master's in this area. You know a lot about that information. You want to remember who your audience is. They're undergraduates. This may be the only class they've ever taken. Yes, you need to teach them some jargon, but that logical argument, that logical information needs to be presented in a way that is accessible to them. Yes? You need to think, how am I going to create shared meaning with them on their level and teach them at the same time? Part of that is really being prepared. There are no perfect public speakers. I'm sure I'll stumble a time or two or do something odd even in this 30 minutes. There are no perfect public speakers, but practice makes better. Practice makes better. So things that you need to think about is, yes, familiarizing yourself enough with the material that you can convey it. Think about the next lab or the class that you're going to teach and run through that material in your mind. Practice it. Talk it out. Listen to yourself. Record yourself. We all have cell phones at this point. Listen and make sure that it makes sense. How many of you are international students? Raise your hand. Okay. If you are having to teach a lab or talk to the students to convey information, I had probably one of my most successful graduate teaching assistants was Ming-Fei Guan, Fiona. And she just graduated with her master's. I would sit in her labs. She was directly from China. This was her first year in the United States. I knew ahead of time that she had proficiency with the language. But it became apparent when I went to go sit in her lab that she had practiced the lab before she ever got there. She knew what she was going to say. It made sense to her, and she was very fluent in the language. So practice and understand what the message is. It needs to make sense to them, not just to you. All right, so that's logos. And that's honestly the easiest thing that we're going to talk about, or the shortest time that we're going to spend. Because remember, it's not necessarily the quality of information that you're conveying, but how you convey that information that makes it worthwhile to the audience. It's not the quality of the information, but how you convey it. All right, number 2, we're going to look at ethos, credibility. If you were in that lab, the leading lab panel with me, we talked about that professionalism and credibility, and the first thing being the first impression. Now, how long does it take to make a first impression? Right, 30 seconds to a minute, someone knows whether they're going to hire you. 7 to 17 seconds, you've made that first impression. Your students are already assuming characteristics about you, whether they're true or not. What have you had time to do in 7 to 17 seconds? Walk in the room, not a whole lot. So nonverbal communication is key, and we're going to start with that first impression. Especially on the first day and the first couple of weeks, you want to kind of amp up, right? Put on full body armor. Play the part. Make sure that you're dressed very professionally, because that's the first thing that they're going to see. You know how it was when you were an undergraduate. You walked into a class for the very first time. And if a professor had on or a TA had on shorts and sandals, what were your automatic assumptions about that class? It was going to be an easy A. They were going to be laid back, right? If you walked in and the individual had on slacks and a jacket, what did you automatically assume about them? They were serious. They might have it together. But guess what? It also adds to their perception of your credibility. And yes, you might have to say the first class, you know what? I am, introduce yourself, so-and-so. This is why I'm your lab instructor or your instructor for this course. This is my background. This is my expertise. It adds to the credibility. But then nonverbal communication, not just your appearance. So what I'm going to do is I want you to, I haven't made spots on your handout right here, but I want you to draw 4 lines, just short lines, one in the margin somewhere, one under the other, 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now here's a little quiz. Talking about first impressions and how people kind of establish how they feel about you. They've done studies and they found out, okay, how do we learn about a new situation? So you meet a person for the first time or you walk into a new space, physical space for the first time. How do we make those first impressions? Okay, so let's put it on a one-to-one interaction. Your students are coming in and they're going to see you for the first time. How much of that, those 4 are going to add up to 100%? How much of learning about a new situation occurs through sight alone? Sight is going to be the first line. How much of that 100% do you think occurs through sight alone? 80%. Someone said 70. 80%. So it's not just what you have on, but it's all about your body language. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit when you're doing your public speaking. The second line, hearing. How much does someone learn about a new situation through hearing? You've already taken up 80%. 10%, about 10%, which is why lecturing is the least effective method of teaching. You need to get them engaged. You need to get them involved, interacting somehow. 10%, which goes back to it's not what you say, but how you say it. Yes, you need to have prepared. Yes, you need to have that content ready, but you need to engage them and connect. You need to look like the credible person that is speaking. Okay, the second or the third is through, let's see, touch. Third is through touch. And the fourth, I'll go ahead and tell you, is smell and taste. Look, they just go hand in hand. Don't ask me about the taste part, okay? Just go hand in hand. Sensory. All right, so 5% through touch and 5% through smell and taste. Now, I would argue that sometimes the touch or even the smell and taste can overwhelm that first experience that you have with someone. If someone doesn't smell good, right? We're very sensitive to smell. You all need to make sure that you smell good, okay, on the first day, but not too good. Don't bathe in cologne. But, you know, yes, smell. Second, the third one there is touch. So what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you and shake their hand and give them honest feedback about their handshake. Go ahead. Okay. All right. Now, what does this have to do with public speaking? Well, I'm just trying to set you up on a good foot for that first day of class, right? And maybe even meeting someone for an interview. Any of those things are really public speaking occasions. But what do we not like about a handshake? The limp fish. Okay, that's number one. We don't like the limp fish. We don't like this half handshake thing. Because what does it convey? What does it communicate? Weakness, lack of interest, lack of investment in the interaction. So what you want to do, men and women, and here's the thing, I think men sometimes, guys, you aren't fully invested in a regular handshake with a female because you're not sure about the female, right? Should I really shake her hand? Yes, you really should just shake her hand. And girls, shame on you if you give this little sappy sorority girl handshake. We're not doing it, right? So the web of your hand goes into that other person's web, whatever, and a nice firm handshake, you look them in the eye. It may be a great thing to do on the first day of class as people are walking in the room. Make them stop and look at you one at a time. Get there 15 minutes early. Hi, what's your name? So-and-so. Great, I'm your instructor. That also helps you as a public speaker break the ice. It breaks the ice for you so that when that clock chimes at 9 o'clock and the class starts, you're not just kind of totally cold, right? Put them in the hot seat and stand out at the door and shake their hand and make them tell you their name. It'll make you feel better when you start. But we don't like the limp fish because that's just sappy and weak. And we don't like the bone crusher, right? Where the guys, it's almost like overcompensating. Let's don't do that. Let's don't do that. And then you've got the females have ring imprints on the rest of their fingers. So a nice firm handshake, level, look the person in their eye, repeat their name. So, you know, hi, I'm going to be your instructor. I'm Dr. Chilcutt. What's your name? Go ahead. Jay. Jay, so nice to meet you. Repeat their name. Helps you. You're going to have to remember these people's names in the first place. But that will help you break the ice on the first day. So the handshake is crucial as well in nonverbal, but so is everything else. As a public speaker in your class, please, cardinal sin number 1. This is not your friend. Okay? In fact, this podium really doesn't like you at all. And what it's communicating to your audience is that you don't like them very much either. So what you should do is make sure that you invest in a clicker. And if you can at all, when I do CE workshops, I never even stand on a stage. I walk around and talk to people. So walk into your class, talk to them, figure out, since you're going to prepare as a public speaker with your material ahead of time, where are places in my content for the day that I can say, so give me an example of that. Can you think of an example? Or ask a question, but be with them and don't have any physical barriers between you and your audience, because that'll make them feel like you're one of them. It has a lot of nonverbal connotations when you're down on their level and engaging with them. So, there's that. The third thing with nonverbal, third, can't count, the third thing is your voice. So yes, your gestures, back to gestures. Hold on. You don't want to stand in front of the room. You're not in front of the podium. You have a clicker, but don't do this. Don't do this. This, what does this look like? You can say it. I have to go to the bathroom. And this is a nervous tick. You're not thinking about it, but you're doing it. Make sure that you have a nice solid stance, that you're walking around, you're open. You can use hand gestures, that's fine. You can use visual aids, which is wonderful as a public speaker. Show them what you're talking about. It helps them. Ask for examples. The third thing is the voice. Females, I'm talking to you. Guys have a very easy time. As a public speaker, that tenor to bass voice is nice, resonant sound. It carries, people can understand it. Ladies, the higher the pitch, the less credibility it's perceived to have. If you have a really sweet voice, they're going to think that you're not that smart. Think about it. Listen to broadcasters, female broadcasters, NPR, CNN. They have tenor voices, alto to tenor. They have trained themselves. Females in powerful positions, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, they've had some kind of training typically. Female politicians have all had vocal training. And they all have nonverbal coaches. How to walk, how to wave at people. Everything is a nonverbal gesture that communicates something to their audience. So ladies, record yourself. How many of you have recorded yourself on your cell phone, on your voicemail, gone back and listened to it and said, I don't sound like that? You do. You sound just like that. So, here's one thing I would suggest for nonverbal. I don't know how many classrooms that you're going to be in that have automatic cameras in the room. I know that in our college we have cameras in almost every room that we can record. But possibly record yourself giving a lecture or a lab and go back and watch it. Every time I've done that, I do that every once in a while giving my lecture. One time in this 222 room, I thought that I was being engaging. It's a stadium room. So I don't stand behind the podium. I walk this way and I walk that way and I talk to my students and I walk up the stairs and I talk to these students and those students and I ask questions and I walk back down the stairs and I recorded my lecture. And I went back and watched it. And I looked like a yo-yo. I had no idea how distracting that was. No idea. So I had to tone it back. You never stop learning. You never stop learning about your presentation skills or your public speaking skills. So my number one tip is to record yourself, either on your phone, just leave it on the podium and record yourself, or with some kind of camera in your room and play it back and see how you're doing. Okay. Finally, we're going to look at the verbal communication and then pathos. How many of you know that you have verbal filler issues? And like, and you know. Here's the thing. Our brain works at 4 times the speed of anyone's mouth, including your own. So if you have not practiced what it is that you're going to be speaking about, then instead of pausing to think of the next word, you're going to interject an a like. This is what I'd like you to do. Find someone that you live with, that you work with, that's next to you a lot during the day, and say for the next week until school starts, every time I say like or in an interaction, I want you to act like the dog whisperer. Has everybody ever seen the dog whisperer, right? Cesar Millan, and he goes, tch, tch, tch. Yes. Ask somebody to kind of prompt you every time that you use a verbal filler, because to do that in front of a class makes you seem, once again, less credible. And the more you practice the self-awareness, the more you have self-awareness about using those verbal fillers, the more you can regulate and take them out of your language. But the more you practice the message ahead of time and are comfortable with it, the less you're going to use those verbal fillers. I was asked one time to do a quick, I was at church, and somebody said, hey, Alexa, can you get up? I mean, this is right before it started, right? Get up and talk about this for 5 minutes. Sure, I can do that. Whatever. I'm so good. So I got up there, and I talked, and I sat down, and my husband said, oh, wow. What? You said 50 times. Now, this was years ago, okay? However, I had no idea that I had ever said one time. Once again, video record yourself. Self-awareness is key. Making sure that you're eliminating that from your language is going to make you seem more credible to your audience and make you a better public speaker. The final thing is pathos. Now, what does that mean? It means some kind of emotional appeal. Here's what every undergraduate student or any other audience that you ever speak to, the one question that they're going to be asking themselves: what's in it for me? Why should I listen? Why do I care? The quality of that lovely information that you may be presenting may be brilliant, but you have to connect it to them. You have to connect the dots for them. What does it matter on some emotional level? What does it matter to their life, to their learning, to the world that they live in? In every class, think about ways that you can bring in or ask them about real-life examples so that you're creating some type of emotional appeal that they connect with that information. If you think about political election periods where you have politicians up and they're giving some speech, really, most of the time, if you took away that politician and you just read the transcript, they really wouldn't be saying a whole lot. It's about evoking emotion in the audience on some level. And if you'll think about it, they always have some story, right? Some narrative, something that has human emotional appeal. That's how they connect to their audience. So don't go into a class with any concept, and I know rocket science may be very difficult, or calculus 3. I get it. I really don't get it, but sure. That's why I'm not a math PhD. But think of some way that you can connect with them, even if it's not about calculus, but you just walk in and start talking for the first 3 minutes about some interesting thing that happened in the news and ask their opinion. Some of the greatest things that my TAs have done over the year to connect with their students are simple, very simple things that warm up the room for any public speaker and for yourself. So use this as a tool for you, but for them too. One of them is question of the day. If you have a lab of, let's say, 30 students, to take roll, what they would do is, here's the question of the day. And it may be, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite meal that your mother makes when you go home? Whatever. Come up with some crazy questions. Disney movie, song, music. And let them get invested in the process and make you feel like they know each other and that you're interested in them. As a public speaker, that's one of the most important things that you can do is try and connect with your audience. Because once you've made that connection, then they're more interested in actually listening to what you have to say. Okay, so finally, we've done all of that. And what I want you to do is, between now and time that school starts next week, get your cell phone, and create some type of introduction that you're going to give on that first day of class or lab. My name is so-and-so, this is what I've done, this is the master's that I'm going to be getting, and something that can relay a little bit about yourself to the class so that they're interested in you. Record that on your cell phone and listen back to it and see kind of what you can gain to learn from so that you can become a better, more proficient public speaker. If you have any questions about public speaking, I'll kind of stand over to the side. But once again, make sure you've got 3 things. And this is not necessarily the 3 that I talked about, but professionalism, that ethos, that credibility, being prepared, practice ahead of time, know what you're going to say, and finally, that idea of being approachable to your class so that they want to come, talk to you, ask you questions, and have a genuine interest in coming to the class and listening to your content. All right, thank you for your time.